afterwards than they do in the evening. So it's like you're helping us to create kind of like an educational resource, which will be useful for hopefully years to come. So we're here. We're your kind of like audience and support group. So yeah, we normally start with a check-in, and maybe we could say we've got about 10 minutes. So why don't we say, and people will hopefully join us while we're doing that. So we could say name, where we're calling from, and maybe just like any kind of projects or activities we're involved in connected to permaculture or similar work. So I'll start off. Andy Goldring today stepping in for Catherine Baker, who's the Land and Projects Coordinator. Work at Permaculture Association, but I think I'd say more about being part of Leeds Permaculture Network. And we run a permaculture course, which is midway, going really well. Got a really fantastic kind of lively group. And I'm involved in a project called Climate Action Leeds, which is a sort of citywide project over 5 years, 2 years left to go. And I've created a kind of a city hub where people come together to work on making Leeds a zero carbon, nature friendly, socially just place by the 2030s. And today it's been really nice today because we've got the art of hosting course happening. So all day I've been working amidst people laughing all the way through the day, which has been lovely. Hi, Peter. So I'm going to pass to Hannah. How are you? And yeah, just say whatever you like really about where you are and what you're doing. And
hello. Yeah, I'm very good, thanks. I'm in Roscommon in the west of Ireland, and I suppose the project that kind of drew me to this particular get together is something that's very nascent still, that I'm kind of I have sort of designed it, and then with a few other people, and then made a few efforts at it, and I would like to set it up as a social enterprise, and I just haven't got this. There seems to be a gap between like where we're at with the plans and the ideas and the how we actually get it to a bit of momentum that it can be brought to life. So it's kind of a whole community-based permaculture, I suppose, is kind of like would be like the heading of it, and we would like it to involve training and also developing a community of practice, kind of professionally and unprofessionally, just within the community. So kind of gathering and connecting people's skills that are already around, which we're doing slowly, but just really informally, I suppose. And then kind of having that sort of community of practice that when so we can do stuff not for work, but just for community, I suppose, between us all, or between anyone that's in need of it. And then at the same time, we can also have like the economic driving force of the social enterprise, which would be permaculture services, which I do train people sometimes to do, and I do myself for my livelihood. So I kind of feel that there's a massive opportunity there, really. And we're just trying to knit it all together, really. We kind of have it knitted together in a diagram, but we don't seem to be able to like quite get to it. We just kind of, at the moment, I'm a sole trader. I'm just self-employed, and then the other people kind of that have been inputting into it are either self-employed or they have jobs or whatever. So there's no one that has like the time and the space and the finance to kind of just like roll with it and give it the push that it needs. So kind of that's where I'm from. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Hannah. That's great. And let's pass to Sally.
Thanks, Andy. I'm Sally. I'm in Penarth, just on the edge of Cardiff. I have a community growing project and a social enterprise, which is the thing that I'm interested in learning about, how we can measure the impact of it. The community growing project, we have a community garden in a public park. I'm very proud to call myself a scyther, so I'm holding that traditional skill with a big handful of others. My social enterprise, we're interested in how we can use permaculture, arts, and performance poetry and growing. They do knit together some way in my mind. Maybe nature connection is the way that they all knit together to bring people more into dependent community. Yes, it's good to be here.
Fantastic. That sounds great. Thanks, Sally. Let's pass to Rosie.
Yeah, hello. I'm based in West Yorkshire in the South Pennines. My partner Steve and I manage a 7-acre permaculture small holding called Edibles. We grow veg for which we sell to a couple of restaurants, and we do our own seasonal veg boxes from June till October. And we have a sort of a cow shed, which has become a bit of a community hub, which allows us to, we're about to run our second introduction to permaculture, but it's, people use it for yoga and Alexander technique. We have gigs and, so it's quite a nice little community hub. And we have worked with our local high school whenever they've had the funding to do kind of permaculture modules in their curriculum. So I suppose we have been going maybe for 10 or more years. Each year we're focusing more on growing veg efficiently, trying to earn a living from veg, which is very, very hard, and fruit and through forest gardening. We're about to do up our final dilapidated shed with a view to doing more preserving that doesn't take over the whole kitchen. Because I do kimchi and kombucha and it's just stuff everywhere. So trying to get a bit more formal and have a business space. So I'm interested in measuring how we've got to where we are, where we're going. And we're really bad at measuring anything or even labeling plants. So I kind of hoping tonight might get me a bit more focused and able to.
There's no doubt you've had a big impact in the area. That's for sure. So
it'd be nice to sort of I suppose evaluate that and think about it.
Absolutely. Okay, thanks, Rosie. So I'll pass to Peter and then Daniel. Hi, Peter. If you missed us, we're just saying where we're calling from and anything about our permaculture practice, quite concise, just a few things about what we're doing.
Right. Well, we've got about 8.5 acres here, but it's mostly a field. Well, there's an acre of woodland, a field, and a couple of forest gardens amounting to another acre. And we're retired, so we really just look after ourselves. Well, there are 4 households here, so we share that. My main activity in permaculture is supporting a local group where we do 1 day a month usually meet on someone's site and do what some call permablitzes. Work on their site for whatever they want. And the interesting thing is the next meeting, which is next week, is at a shop in the middle of Carmarthen. Oh, sorry, I didn't say we were in South West Wales. In Carmarthen, which is going to open. Well, it's going to become a community hub with a repair shop and meeting places and so on. So that's exciting because so much of permaculture is so focused on land that the rest doesn't get a look in really, or doesn't get really enough acknowledgement. So it'd be interesting to explore that. And then I've been chair of Wales National Permaculture Panamaidhi Cymru until very recently. So organising events across Wales and developing other group networks. And I'm very pleased to say yesterday and today we've developed a new one at Abergavenny.
Oh, great.
Yep.
Yeah, you're very modest, Peter. You've done a lot. Fantastic. Thank you. So Daniel and then Darren, and let's keep it reasonably short so we can move on to the presentation.
I'll keep it short. I'm Daniel, calling from Perth in Scotland. With my wife and I just completed our permaculture design course
Right.
about 3 weeks ago.
Oh.
And we've taken over a derelict historic farm earlier this year, where there's a lot of building work basically to get the house in habitable condition, and we're setting up a learning centre for traditional skills, which is my background. I'm hoping to become a permaculture land site at some point.
Fabulous.
Me here.
Fabulous. Thank you. And Darren?
I'm based in Todmorden in West Yorkshire, and we've got basically a 23-acre farm and a 50-acre ancient woodland that we're slowly converting into a land centre. And I'm also working with several farmers in the area to move them over to a permaculture model as well. So
fantastic.
Nice and busy.
Fantastic. Well, I'm particularly pleased, Daniel, you've joined us, because we can now say that tonight we are Wise Permaculture, because we've got Wales, we've got Ireland, we've got Scotland, and we've got England. So we've got 4 countries for you, Tim. And where are you calling from tonight?
I'm based in Amsterdam, the Netherlands, originally from Germany. And I've been working with Transition Together. Some of you might know this sort of UK, England, Wales, and Scotland focused transition infrastructure building project. As part of Transition Network. And I've been involved with like Eco-Village Network and Ecolese, which is like this national European-wide meta network. So my work has been more on this like level of networks and less on local communities. Yeah.
Well, I should introduce you, because that's kind of my job as host, isn't it? So we're very, very excited to have you here, Tim. I think it was Mike Thomas from Transition Network that introduced me to your work, and it kind of made sense straight away. But I've never actually seen you do a presentation, so I'm really looking forward to tonight, and especially interested to kind of get your sort of simplified version that, you know, could be really accessible to a lot of people, because I think if we could find ways to monitor, evaluate, and learn from the kind of work that we do in our local networks, we can make the case, we can bring in more resources, we can do more of it. So Tim has developed the Scale 3D model as part of his Action Research PhD, focusing on how the practice of network leadership can support the development of transformative capacity in social innovation networks. And Tim has been practically engaged as a network catalyst and strategy consultant in a variety of networks, as he said, including community-led and student-led sustainability initiatives, which seek to transform the way we live, learn, and collaborate for a thriving and just future. So just up permaculture street. I'm not going to say any more. I think we'll just pass on to you to present, and you can do that for 20-30 minutes, and then we'll ask you some questions. So let me just check the sharing's okay. Should be all right.
Yeah.
So yeah, if everyone could just put themselves on mute, and unless you want us to ask you questions as we go, Tim.
Yeah, you're definitely welcome to do that. I also don't plan on presenting for a very long time, maybe just about 10 minutes or so, and then do a bit of a more interactive exercise.
That's absolutely fantastic. Yeah, but we'll put ourselves on mute unless we want to kind of ask a question.
Sure. Great. Well, thanks so much for having me. Really exciting to see that there's more and more interest in the work that I've been doing on helping networks of grassroots community initiatives to have more impact and learn how to improve and bring those ripple effects of transformation into the world. So it's going to be a bit of it's a bit more experimental today, because I didn't want to give you the standard slide deck of of my work, because it's more geared towards the network. So there's I really tried to boil it down today into just 3 slides, and kind of not going into the whole complexity of the framework that I've been developing in my PhD, but really try to boil it down in a more sort of accessible way for the level of projects at a local level instead of networks, the translocal level. So I'm also really keen to hear your feedback, like how's this landing for you? How is this valuable, or what's confusing maybe? Is there something missing? So I'm really keen to also hear your feedback, as this is also something we're working as part of the Transition Together project on, is to develop an impact evaluation and learning tool for local groups. So this feedback will be directly relevant for further developing this kind of prototype that we have at the current moment. So yeah, let me go ahead and share my screen. So first of all, I'm curious to hear why should we actually measure impact? I guess oftentimes people might feel like, oh, I can't really be bothered to do that. It seems like such a hassle to do that. It's only like for pleasing funders or something. So yeah, I'd just be curious what comes up for you when you think about why to measure impact.
I think for me as an artist, it's really hard to know what impression you're making on people with the work, and I'm interested to know whether I'm doing.
So I'm not hearing you anymore.
I think you unmuted by accident, Sally. And you have again. There you are.
I was speaking. Did you not hear? Sorry, I haven't got my camera on.
No, it's fine. I think the mute went on by accident. Just tell us again.
As an artist, it's really hard to get an impression of what people's response are to the work, particularly if you're working in like an outdoor arts festival. You can't send a survey round. You know, and it's really interesting to me to know whether the work that I do is having the impacts on people that I'm anticipating, just to tailor the work, really.
Right. Thank you.
I imagine it might be part of your business case if you're looking at reaching potential clients or an audience at least.
Yeah. I'm quite interested in the unexpected results, and I guess knowing what bit of what I've done has made the difference. Because sometimes we do lots of different things, and it's working out what bit of what we've done has made a difference has been really helpful, because then you can do an awful lot less and still have the same impact, which increases your kind of effectiveness. So yeah, trying to determine what part of what you do makes a difference.
Yeah, that'd be my kind of take on it as well. I feel like there's just a lot of work to do, and it would be nice to know where to at least prioritize energy in terms of outputs, or intended outputs, or what's kind of being successful, I suppose. But also definitely the reason why I started even hearing this idea of measuring impact was because of funders. Not that I have any, but I would like some.
Yeah, I guess I'd go with the geeky permaculture answer, and basically say measure my yields and just make sure that whether or not I'm getting any additional yields that I'm not predicting. So see if things work.
But if we're going to talk about principles, then I would add in apply self-regulation and accept feedback. I guess by actually measuring your impact, you're creating the feedback into your system that helps you to learn and develop what you do. So I guess it's the observe and interact side as well. But yeah, I agree, Darren.
Great, that's already really, really helpful. Any last voices chime in before we move on? Peter? All right. Well, let me just share my screen again. So basically what I'm hearing that I think aligns pretty much with the three main pieces that strike me as why we should measure impact. So one is to learn to improve, right? We want to learn what actually works, as you said, which interventions actually make a difference, and the kind of difference that matters. But we also want to prove to earn, right? So we want to kind of showcase, give people evidence of what you're achieving so that you can convince potential funders or other stakeholders, maybe the local council or some others who you're trying to earn some degree of recognition from or support from. And it's also about building momentum, right? So sort of having this, you're building the motivation of yourself or the people you're working with, that you're actually making the difference that you want to be making, right? And sort of that momentum can easily fizzle out if you're just working nonstop and never actually get that feeling that you're actually making the difference that you're hoping to make. So yeah, that's just my sort of short and catchy way of putting it in as few words as possible. I hope that captures kind of how you were thinking of it, or maybe adds a new twist on it. So now that we've thought a little bit about why, let's think about what actually is impact, or how can we think about impact. And here's where I want to say a little bit about the 3D model, or I call it scale 3D. It's about how you can scale social impact in 3 dimensions in terms of depth, width, and length. So let me go ahead and introduce you to that model. And I found this to be quite an intuitive way of thinking about impacts, which many people like Andy or others who have been interacting with said, this really is a very simple but not a simplistic way of looking at a very complex social change processes. And so first of all, talking about width, this is probably the most common way of thinking about impact. We want to reach more people. We want to expand our engagement. We want to have more people involved in our permaculture garden, our transition project, whatever initiative that we're launching. So let's unpack that width a little bit more, right? So we can think of reaching more people, but especially also more diverse people, right? We don't want to always be stuck in the same sort of oftentimes white middle class bubble. So how to make activity accessible, inclusive, safe for people of different identities, social backgrounds, ways of thinking, so we can really go beyond those circles of people who maybe think fairly the same or look the same or have the same kind of backgrounds. But we also want to have better collaborations with other kinds of organizations. That can be your local council or the school or a sports club, especially organizations who are maybe not so much in the sustainability space yet. So that's a way how you can widen your influence. Or it can also be other social movements, other grassroots initiatives to just have a stronger collective influence. And widening is also about seeing more transition activity, socio-ecological transition activity happening in more places. That can be in more neighborhoods within one city, or it can be in more cities around the country and eventually around the globe. And that in adapting also to different kind of local circumstances and contexts. Right, so how might permaculture gardens look different in I don't know, an area that is more wealthy compared to an area that is that has much lower income levels or other circumstances of less privilege, for instance. And yeah, reaching the mainstream. In the end, you know, some people might think we don't want to go mainstream. We want to kind of keep it niche. But in the end, if you want to have a societal scale transition, we need to widen our influence to actually change the mainstream, so it becomes the new norm for most people to live in social ecological ways. So you can see this as a scale from narrow to wide, right? So you can run activities that have a more narrow reach and only cater to people who are maybe already in your circumference of the kind of networks that you can reach, to having a much wider reach. All right. So then let's move on to the deepening part. And here gets a little bit more juicy, I would say, right? It's really here when we're talking about transformative change. We want to have a fundamental change in existing institutions and the dominant systems that structure our lives, right? And so you could talk about capitalism, colonialism, you know, all these isms that are sort of so deeply embedded in the status quo society that I guess most of us live in. So then what does it mean to create those more fundamental changes as opposed to more shallow level changes? So this is about taking systemic action, right? So it can be nice, it can be important to do things like an urban garden, but as such, maybe that's not a very systemic change, right? Although an urban garden can be a means to have more systemic change if you're really finding ways to learn from that to actually change the whole food system. That can be the food system in a certain area, right? If you work together more directly with farmers, and then you actually create a change in the dominant relationship, where people, instead of going to the supermarket, or in addition to doing that, having more direct relationship with producers of food in their local environment. But you can talk about energy system, mobility systems, right? So there's different kind of systems that you can try and tackle with your projects. So systemic change can sometimes feel a bit more like very distant or out there, but it's also about changing the narratives, the more internal, the cultural part of how we think about the good life, or what sustainability means. Sometimes there's maybe, when people think about sustainability, they still have this image of these kind of green hippies, or it seems a little bit niche. And you know, how can we change the narrative where it just becomes desirable and joyful, and you know, a thing that people look forward to? And I think that's one of the key things that we're so lacking nowadays. But that's why we're seeing so much right-wing backlash and populism, is because people don't have a narrative of what could be a better life moving forward. So then they tend to go backward and vote for populists, like just happened in the Netherlands. And I think, yeah, it's become much more visible or important, or how to say, evident, I guess, that, you know, working on ecological and social change needs to center equity and challenge systems of oppression and exclusion. And that can be in very small ways. You know, it can be already in daily interactions and how we challenge those powers within our own groups, and the way that we interact with other people in our communities. So it's not necessarily, it can sometimes feel like really these big systems out there. But so my invitation is to, when we're looking at the local level, how can we take action in our daily life, in our daily interactions, on those deeper, challenging those institutions that are part of how we've been socialized, or many of us, I guess. And to shift power, you know, I really try to boil it down to just a few words, but there's so much more I could say about each of those, right? So with shifting power, you could talk about the power relationship regarding a community group and the local council, for instance, right? Where the local council takes into account more, or works more collaboratively on a more eye-to-eye level with members of the community rather than the sort of conventional top-down relationship. Yeah, there's many more aspects of power you could talk about, but maybe I'll leave it at that for now. So let's move on to the lengthening piece. And I think the widening and deepening is maybe a bit more how people talk about transformative change more conventionally. And I think the lengthening is maybe something a little bit new or a little bit less explicitly defined in many discourses about scaling impact. So this is really about how can we actually sustain change over time and not have these short-lived projects, or create maybe some transformative change, but then the elected officials change, the politics change, and all of a sudden people go back to the usual business as usual, right? So there's a few conditions that can help us have this lasting, sustained change over time, which is strong relationships, right? The kind of trusting relationships in a community are vital for being resilient in cases of climate emergency or of crises, but also within the movements, right? The strong relations are key for learning and supporting each other to continue doing this work over time, and especially when it gets difficult, right? To be able to have difficult conversations. And here you maybe see already the interaction with deepening. If you want to have challenging conversations about equity, or how we might be reproducing power structures of oppression, maybe you first need to build stronger relationships to have those conversations where you then don't end in conflict and people disband or stop being involved, but to actually have that basis that you can go through conflict and come out the other side and learn and continue growing. Then access to resources, of course, funding, but can also be infrastructure in terms of a community center, or sharing of resources that makes it easier for people to continue being involved in social ecological change. Knowledge resources, learning from best practices or good practices from others, and improving capacity. So in terms of, for instance, going beyond voluntary work and having people being paid for being part of a transition group or other forms of change making. So much of this work is based on volunteerism, right? Which is oftentimes not sustainable in the long run. And especially now when I'm thinking about cost of living crises, these kind of things, we need to find ways to actually create livelihoods so that people can sustain their engagement in sustainable transformations. But it's not only about keeping engagement going or keeping a certain projects going. It's really about also evolving over time and having new ideas and challenging your thinking, right? And adapting to changing circumstances, responding creatively to things like COVID or other kinds of crises that are bound to be becoming more severe over the next decades. Yeah, so I think that pretty much covers those three dimensions. There's more levels of detail in the framework. I'll share the link in the chat so you can go deeper if you want to. But I think maybe this is good enough to get like an initial sense of what those three dimensions are. And I wanted to give you the chance to actually interact with it and sort of think about your own project from this 3D lens. Just before we go ahead and do that, just wanted to say it's not necessary that each project, each movement needs to address all these three dimensions at the same time, right? It can be quite overwhelming to keep this comprehensive view of having impact in all these three dimensions. Sometimes it makes sense to just say, our project, or at least in a certain time frame, our focus is on widening, or maybe one or two of those dimensions. And your emphasis can maybe shift over time. Sometimes maybe you need to start with deepening and really thinking through what actually are sensible interventions, and maybe taking some time out to stop doing what you've been doing, thinking more systematically about your work. and maybe creating conditions of safety, or of creating some internal cultural changes in a group that makes it more safe for people with different backgrounds, or less privileged backgrounds, to be involved in those groups and to feel safe. So sometimes that's kind of a precondition before wanting to become more diverse, right? More inclusive, to actually do some of the inner work first of challenging one's own thinking on the ways that we might be perpetuating oppressive power structures. So having said that, it is also, I think, useful to, even if you say, okay, our main focus is on widening or deepening, to still think, okay, how could our project address all of those 3 dimensions, at least to some degree, to make sure that it's, if it's a 2-year project or whatever, if it's time bound, as most projects are by definition, then how could the impact, or the relationships that we're building, or whatever value that's coming out of that project last beyond the project time frame, so it's not all just done and dusted once the project is gone. How can the learning be captured or inform new projects or other groups over time? And once you get, I feel like this 3D way of thinking is kind of like a seed that you can plant in your consciousness, and over time it will, once you look at change from this perspective, you see more and more like the interrelationships between how working on deepening supports lengthening, or the other way around. And yeah, I've just found it really useful and generative mental device to just look at my own work, or the movements I'm involved in. So maybe just a few more words about the process of how to actually work with this now, in terms of the steps to apply it. And we'll then do like an initial step in actually following this process. So firstly, you want to think about what are the intended results of your work, right? So what is the end goal? Oftentimes we start doing a project because we like it or we feel inspired by it, and then think about impacts later on, if at all. But if we want to have a kind of more systematic approach to creating transformative change, then it's helpful to think with the end goal in mind. What do we want to, what outcomes, what impacts do we want to achieve in the medium to long run? And using this 3D model, what change do we want to create in terms of deepening, widening, and or lengthening? And then as a second step, to think of what's your theory of change, right? So how are the activities that you're doing as part of a project or your local permaculture or transition group? How do your activities contribute to those intended results? What is the logic here? And to really challenge yourself to make your assumptions explicit. So oftentimes we have those implicit assumptions that we think, oh, if we, I don't know, if we're gonna set up this community garden, then everyone will be interested and will join and will reach everyone in the community. But maybe there's some unchecked assumptions there about what prevents people from joining or from finding out about this. So, making those assumptions explicit is key for allowing you to check those assumptions, to maybe ask people or to try different things and see that if those assumptions hold true, and how you could try things differently to have more impact, and to redirect your attention to what is actually maybe sometimes a waste of time and what are the things that really make a difference. And yeah, so the third step is really then to define monitoring and learning approaches. And I put learning in there because so often the emphasis is on monitoring and evaluation, which can sound like quite dry and like a task that you need to do in order to fulfill funders' requirements. But I really want to encourage this view of seeing monitoring and evaluation as fundamentally connected with learning, right? And that we should if we're going to do data collection and data analysis, or trying to be more bring more rigor to our thinking about making change happen, then it should primarily benefit ourselves and make our work more meaningful, more impactful, more fulfilling. So yeah, this step, it's really about thinking through what kind of evidence would we need to know if we're making the difference that we're intending to see. And that can be, quantitative, measuring how many people show up to events, or which kind of people show up, or doing some kind of using some proxies to calculate how much carbon emissions are you saving through a certain project. But it can also be more subtle, right? Thinking about what experiences do you want people to have, and how do you want people to shift their feeling of their sense of place, maybe their connection to the land, or a sense of belonging to their community. So oftentimes those kind of more qualitative, experiential dimensions of impact are overlooked because it's so hard to measure, right? So then if you can't measure it, then we don't value it. But yeah, so I think, again, really encouraging to think of what really matters, what do we value also in terms of the inner part, the experience. Yeah, and then also to first of all think of what kind of evidence do you need to see if you're making the difference you want to have. What kind of evidence could help to test the assumptions that you might have about your theory of change. But also to think of how are you going to actually get that data, or create that evidence base. Can you do that? Can you try and really tie that into the delivery of your project, so it's not as often happens something you think of as an afterthought once you're done with the project? Hey, let's see how we can report on this now and evaluate what we've done. But then you actually didn't collect any data that needed to happen at a specific time while people were part of your event or of a group. And oftentimes there's a missed opportunity if you try to do it afterwards. Missed opportunity both in terms of access to the data, but also a missed opportunity for learning, right? So again, if evaluation only happens at the end, then you can't really change anything anymore. So really trying to see, okay, what is a sensible rhythm or a meaningful moment where you can plan to actually take a step back and reflect on what happened, what was meaningful, what was your own experience in making the change happen that you're trying to make, and asking other people what was their experience like and what was meaningful to them, what really made a difference for them, and then to really reflect and digest that and feed that into your planning of the next cycle. Maybe this is a cycle of that you can tie into the seasonal cycles. Can be like every quarter, as it happens in more conventional contexts, or on an annual basis, depending on what makes sense in your situation, of course. Yeah, I think that's all I wanted to share in terms of slides. So maybe just to hear a few voices of reactions before we go into the more interactive part of really then working with this model. How's this landing for you right now? Yeah, be curious to hear some impressions.
Great. So Peter?
It's going to take quite a while to just absorb all that and think about its application. But my first thoughts, I've been unsuccessful and also successful in getting grants, and immediate thoughts at the time of doing evaluation were on outputs, things that are material things, and the Heritage Lottery Fund insists on focusing on outcomes, and that's an important difference. And your approach there is obviously focused on outcomes, which is helpful, I think, for Well, for me anyway. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter.
Tim, do you want to say anything about the difference between kind of outcomes and outputs, and your view on the outcomes? Or
yeah, I guess it's a quite common trap in a way to focus more on the outputs, and that those are the things that are just more easily measured, and say how many people joined your event or participated in a project, and how many, I don't know, guides were produced, but to really think about outcomes maybe requires a bit more effort, both in terms of like thinking through what actually are the outcomes, and then to measure them in a meaningful way. But if you're trying to make impact happen, then that's kind of where you say where the rubber hits the road, like the important piece to be looking at.
Right.
Because the problem with it is that we had to define or state what the outcomes will be at the start of the application process. But because you don't really know what the outcomes are going to be, you might know what you hope there will be, but all you can do is hope that the outputs will lead to the outcomes that you would hope to achieve.
Well, yeah, I guess that's where this sort of strategic thinking comes in, right? That you take some time in advance to think, what are your intended outcomes? What would be your happiest dream? What would you love to see happen as a result of your work? And so that was the first step I talked about, right? And then to really think through, okay, what actually needs to happen to make that to see that result, and to really challenge also your own thinking, and maybe get feedback from others, or maybe get get different people involved in the ones we usually interact with, to just have a different perspective and challenge your own assumptions.
Great, thanks, Tim.
And then of course, not to be only focusing on those outcomes that you've intended or that you've promised to your funders, but to still keep an open view, like what are the emergent outcomes? What are the things that we didn't predict, but actually maybe that's matters much more than what we thought about initially. So this is where things like collecting stories, or asking, doing a focus group, asking people in the community what really mattered most to you about what we've done, and collecting those stories can really help to challenge your own thinking or harvest those emergent outcomes.
Yeah. Thanks, Tim. And before I move on to Daniel, just welcome to Monica. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Monica. Nice to see you here.
And yeah, so Daniel, have you got a question for Tim?
Thank you, first of all, Tim. It looks very broad. I really appreciate the wide scope. It seems very complete. I was just wondering a bit about if you could say a few things about your research that underpins it. I imagine this is the outcome of a long drawn out process, and I wondered about sort of where you got your data from, were these case studies that you looked at, and were any of these existing permaculture projects in particular that would be interesting to hear.
Yeah, thanks for that question. So my main empirical focus was on a transition network and EcoLease, this European meta network where global eco-village movement is part of. So mainly focused on transition and eco-villages, and again, more at the level of networks. And I didn't do any case research with local, actual local eco-villages or transition groups. And I also looked at student-led sustainability groups, like students working within the universities to try to make their campus more sustainable, to work together with staff members and get funding from university leadership. So that was like a movement that I was part of myself, and we developed a model during the university. So it's a bit like kind of like what transition initiatives try to do within their city, students try to do within their university. So that was the main context of my empirical work. And there's 4 publications that are the core of my work, which you can find. I just put 2 links in the chat. One is a slideshow that introduces the model in a bit more detail, And in that slideshow, in the notes field, you can also find the links to all 4 of my publications that describes how this 3D framework was initially conceptualized and refined through applying it in practice. And then eventually like applying it as a practice tool for strategy and evaluation. And this is also the second link to the most recent publication, really about the application benefits and the process to how to use it. Any other reactions or questions before we move on?
I just have a question around the could you give an example of the step 2? I didn't quite follow that, what that involves, describing the theory of change.
So maybe you can tell me a little bit like what would be the intended results that you want to see from the work that you're a part of, and then as a second step, think about what are the activities that you're doing to lead towards that.
Yeah, okay. So intended results would be, God, a lot of things, but let me see. Employment opportunities or work opportunities kind of in regenerative fields for people who need them locally in our local community. That would be one.
Beautiful. Yeah, I think that's a great one to focus on, creating more employment opportunities in sustainable fields. So what could then be a way to get there? What's an intervention or project, an initiative that you're already doing or thinking to do to get there?
We're doing mentoring, training. That's about it so far.
Right. Yeah, so I guess the theory of change here would be to again make those assumptions explicit about how does mentoring and training lead to that outcome of people accessing those jobs. Right, so I guess
how does it lead to that?
Yeah.
Is the purpose to kind of identify what's missing?
Not necessarily what's missing, just to make it explicit, like if you're going to do mentoring and you're hoping to achieve mentoring and training, you're hoping to achieve these employment benefits, or not employment, but you know what I mean, increased access to employment, then there's some assumptions there, maybe that receiving training will be enough for that, or maybe it just kind of tries to make it a bit more precise, like how does the increase in skills, or what kind of competencies or skills do people need to receive from that training to be able to get those kind of jobs.
Okay, yeah.
And maybe, and as you said, maybe then making that more specific can help you to identify, oh, maybe it's not just the training, and maybe there's other kinds of support or things that you just haven't thought about yet, that would need to be part of that theory of change to really get to that end result. And sometimes that can be, that involves other people, right? That you say, oh, this is too much of what I can do, and you need to collaborate with other community groups or other actors who can fill those different puzzle pieces that together bring about that long-term intended outcome. So I think that can also really impress funders when you can really have that sort of specificity and say, with humility, like, okay, this is realistically all that we can do, and we need all these other actors to do their bit, and but you can kind of not, you can be realistic about what your contribution is to that longer term end goal.
Okay, yeah, thanks. I think I've kind of got it.
If you put theory of change diagram into your favorite search engine, then you'll come up with it's like a narrative. It takes you through from goals all the way through to, or long-term impacts all the way through to what you're actually going to do. So yeah, it's worth, the diagrams will be helpful as well.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, and thanks, Monica, for reading that as well.
Cool.
Yeah,
so
Yes, sorry,
Go ahead, Rosa.
Tim. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I've really enjoyed, as you're saying, how intuitive your model is. It's not a list or bullet points. It's something, yeah, I can visualize, and yeah, something very liberating about it that I find hopefully will help me form my thoughts a bit more coherently, and yeah, give more purpose and meaning and yeah, impact to what we do. So yeah, thank you. I'm looking forward to how we sort of can apply it and talk about it. Yeah, thank you.
So can I ask a quick question, Tim? Is the tool designed for applying over a particular timescale? Because with a lot of the projects that I'm involved in, for example, you'll want to analyze on the short term, the mid-term, the long term, the very long term. Would you run the tool independently for each of these, or is there a way of linking that in so you get a connected output from it over time?
Yeah, I would say it limited to a certain time frame. I mean, I would need to know a bit more about what your project is that you're thinking about, but I guess, for instance, in the Transition Together project at from Transition Network, for now it's been a 3-year project, and we said in the first 1 to 2 years we wanted to focus more on deepening in terms of supporting existing groups to be stronger, to do more systemic work, or be more aware of importance of social justice issues and things like that, before widening and trying to support more groups to get started, or to help existing groups to become more inclusive, right? So first strengthening that basis of the existing group. So that's maybe an example of how to say over the first year of a project, more emphasis will be on deepening before going to widening. Or you could say, some of those widening outcomes are more long-term, like, I don't know, maybe influencing more mainstream organizations, or, reaching people who are not so familiar yet, or even critical to sustainability initiatives. And maybe a more medium-term outcome in widening would be to, just collaborate more with different kind of grassroots organizations that are maybe more readily willing to work with you, and that can be then a milestone to get to those longer term outcomes.
Right, so you're using it more to guide planning and development of the project rather than to sort of analyze the project at various stages.
Well, you can do both, right? So that's why I showed this diagram with these arrows in between. So it's not just a linear process. It's you start with the long-term goal. You see how, okay, what conditions do we need to create to get there? You try to measure or collect evidence, test your assumptions, and that again might shape your thinking about what actually are the long-term goals. And maybe you want to actually shift and see, actually what we thought about initially doesn't make that much sense, or we could better focus on them. So it's a kind of iterative learning process, ideally.
Thank you.
Cool. Sally?
It's not really, I mean, just the appreciation for the years that you've put into bringing this together. And when I look at that initial slide that you saw, you said that you felt it was generative, and I could just see all these ideas popping in my brain of things that I could do to kind of demonstrate these areas. But the thing that really sort of fitted for me was where you talk about they all kind of cross over with each other. For a long time, and my project, which has been running since January 2020, I've been thinking about Adrienne Mary Brown's work. She's a thinker and an activist, and she wrote a book called Emergent Strategy. But she's got this idea about networks and how at the moment our propensity is to go kind of mile wide and inch deep with the way that we build our networks. But she talks about this idea of going inch wide and mile deep. And I could really see how these kinds of structures, or I don't know, tools or thinking points around your model really, and it kind of helped me to see how what I do can have the impact that I'm hoping for. So yeah, it's been really insightful. Thank you for coming and sharing with us.
Right, love to hear that. Curious, Monica, if you want to share anything, since you didn't get the chance to check in yet, so curious what's going on for you, or how is this landing for you?
Yeah, I literally, Tim, was just messaging you as well. So I came here for the transition group that I'm part of, our local transition group. We've got a community garden, but I'm also, personal disclosure, I'm also working with the hub development for transition. And so for me, I came here with the transition small project, and then I've kind of got ideas for the bigger projects that I'm working on as well. So yeah, I'm enjoying sort of seeing its application. I guess I've heard you, Tim, speak around this before, but it's been really interesting to see how it's applied. So yeah, I think that's all I need to say at the moment. Yeah, I'm just here absorbing.
Wonderful. So I wanted to share with you a bit more about how you could actually start using this right now. So I made a little Jamboard, which I'll put the link for that in the chat. But before I do that, I'm just gonna show you a little bit how to work with that. So I'm just gonna share my screen again. So what I've done on this Jamboard, which is, in case you don't know, like a virtual whiteboard, like a simplified Miro board. And the idea is that each of you can access this and select one of those sticky notes here on the left side. You have that sticky note symbol, and then write the name of your project, and maybe just in a couple of keywords, what is sort of the ultimate goal that your project is trying to achieve. And where would you say is your main focus? Is it mostly about widening or deepening or lengthening? Acknowledging that it can address multiple of these dimensions, but where would you say is like your primary emphasis? And then, so we'll just do that first, and just to hear a little bit more about what are you actually what changes are you trying to bring about? And then we'll go to the next step where you can each take a canvas for your own project. So I made multiple of these, and then put your project name in the middle and say, how could your project achieve widening, deepening, and lengthening? So what would be the different contributions your project makes to each of those? So yeah, let's just take a couple of minutes where you can reflect on that for yourself. Let's just focus on this first step for now. Where would you see your project's main focus, and then just position that on this canvas. Anybody having any troubles accessing that?
Yeah, I had to request access.
Share it with everyone. Oh, sorry. Second, if you reload it now, then you should be able to access
that's
it.
working. Great. Oh, it's view only.
I did change it to edit, so maybe you have to reload it once more.
It's okay. Yeah, great. Thanks.
Sorry, I can't work out how to. Which icon do I click on to write?
Fourth one down.
Fourth one down, exactly.
Sort of looks like a sticky note, I guess, under the big arrow.
It's a big arrow pointing right, yeah?
So you fourth one down. So it will come up sticky note when you float your arrow on it.
Okay, just says Rosie Lonnan. Do I just type?
Well, so not on the Zoom window, but you need to open the link in the chat in your browser.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm just sharing my screen so that people who want to see the recording later can see what's happening. Okay, cool. So nice. We have a fairly, we have a spread. It's not all clustered in one of those dimensions. So I guess we could do a quick round and just hear a little bit about what makes you think that what you put down here fits under those categories. So yeah, not everyone has to share, but if you like to, maybe we can just spend a few minutes on that before going on to the next step. Who would like to go first and say a little bit about where you placed your post-it and why you put it there?
Want to go?
Andy?
Are you coming in, Monica?
Yeah, I was secretly like holding up my finger just in case anyone saw. I suppose I put 2 because I was still pondering which project to use. So I used this sort of transition community garden project, and I put under widening first because it initially was set up to really get the community connected. So I put cohesive community, whatever, I couldn't think. Connected. Basically, it evolved from seeing people on the doorstep, and so wanting to do something more than just waving when we all were allowed out for 30 minutes to cheer the NHS. And so we basically took over a bit of space, and it was just really to invite people to get connected was the main thing. And then I put it under, so that was under widening. And then I put it under deepening. I put another one under deepening because I also felt it was getting people to talk within the community on a deeper level. So from our discussions in the garden and working on the land, we then were able to discuss things that we could actually take a joint up and sort of like a action. We could take action on it, because it was almost like we started to give voice and air concerns that we had, and then found that other people felt similar ways as well. So it was around sort of deepening that connection to be able to make an impact in our community. And then I stopped after that, but that I suppose helps other people to think too.
Great. Thanks, Monica. I'll jump in. I've got one, and then I'm going to pick on someone else. So I put Leeds Permaculture Network. I put training young people. It's not only young people, but we're trying to get young people in as well, which we are. And I put that between lengthening and widening, because the emphasis on bringing in young people is about then giving them the skills and the confidence to continue the next generation. They'll develop their own projects that will continue into the future. So there's a kind of a lengthening continuity aspect to that. And then there's a widening aspect as well, in as much as the way we're trying to advertise the courses and where we're advertising the courses means that we're definitely increasing the diversity of people engaged. So age, gender, ethnicity, it's exciting. We've got a really, really mixed group of people. So that certainly feels like who's involved in permaculture is getting much broader. So yeah, between widening and lengthening, and to some extent, obviously, we're deepening people's understanding of how to make change with permaculture. So there's an aspect of that, but I think mainly lengthening and widening. So yeah, who shall I pass to? Anybody else want to come in? Sally's smiling.
I'm always happy to talk, Atty. Always happy to talk. So I really couldn't, I just was so focused on my community growing project here. And for the lengthening thing, I was really interested to note that we really don't think very much about the future. For us, it's about doing what we're doing right now and then learning from that to work out what we do next. So I think we could probably do a little bit of growing if we put some attention into this idea of lengthening. Our conversations are very often about how we shift people's thinking from, we live in this place, it's very middle class, wealthy, but with pockets of massive disadvantage. But everybody here, people are driving around in their urban tractors, whatever you call them, Land Rovers, and kind of just taking care of me. So we've been trying to kind of encourage people to come to our community growing space to kind of support each other. So yeah, I'll put that there, which feels like deepening to me. And then we're very good here in the place where I live. It's only a mile square, about 20,000 people, but there are a huge number of community growing groups. There are, every park, and there are lots of them, has its own group, and we're really good at working together, and that's interesting to note, I think.
That's great. Thanks, Sally. Anyone else want to come in? Otherwise, we could. Did you say there's a second part of this exercise, Tim?
Yeah, I'm aware we're running a bit over time. Maybe like I think we have 15 minutes left for this session, right?
Sure.
Was there anything else you still wanted to use this time for? Or?
No, I mean, this is fantastic. It's a really rich conversation. I think we're learning a lot. So yeah, I mean, in your hands.
Yeah, so again, maybe I'll just share a little bit more here before we go into the exercise. So you can just, if you go, you can see my screen if you go on the Zoom window, just in case you were still on your browser. So up here, there's a little frames button. And if you click on that frames, you see the same frame as of slide 2, 3, 4, copied many times. So you can just choose one of those. And we should be able to see the ones that you've chosen by just selecting it. And then once you've done that, you can just spend a couple of minutes and thinking through how might your project contribute to each of those dimensions. I wonder, maybe I'll already give you a bit of a heads up and say if you want to go and dive deeper into this model and actually apply it, maybe also together with some of your group members or collaborators. There's another document here that I've called the 3D Project Canvas, where you can basically, this is the exercise I'm proposing now, to think of what are the intended results in each of those 3 dimensions. And then the next step would be to think of the theory of change, as I've said. What are the activities that could help you achieve those intended results? What are assumptions that you might need to check? And then when you scroll down further, monitoring and learning. So clarifying, what do we actually want to learn? What are the, are we widening the diversity of people who are part of our training course, for instance? Okay, what data sources would help us understand that? Doing a participant survey, for instance, and when will who collect and reflect on this data, right? To really make it clear, like when is this data collection going to happen? Who's going to be responsible for it? But also when are we going to come back and analyze or reflect on that data to then inform further learning or adjustment of your plans. So
can I ask, is this part of the tool that you're making with Transition Together?
This is a prototype, you could say, yeah.
Great. That's really exciting. I mean, we're just quickly to say we're applying to UK lottery to UK fund, and one of the things we want to do is find a tool that we can use across the whole network, both at a network level, but for projects themselves, to do this monitoring, evaluation, learning, understanding our impact. So it'd be really great to pick up on this, and I think it feels like a good fit to what we're doing. So yeah, I love the simplicity of it, even though I know there's a lot of complexity behind it. This looks really, really great.
Cool. Glad to hear that. So yeah, I'll put the link to that project canvas also in the chat. So if you already want to start working on that, feel free. You'll have to make a copy of it for yourself. So you'll have also continuous access to it. And I imagine we can share all these links also as a follow-up email.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe let's just take a few more minutes. Let's say 5 minutes or so for each of you to just get some time to either use the canvas already or just the Jamboard, and think a bit about how your project could contribute to each of those 3 dimensions. If anyone's having trouble finding or navigating the Jamboard, let me know.
Tim,
Yes.
hiya. How can we get so that 3D mapping that I'm just working on the I've forgotten what it's called now.
Jamboard.
That
Yeah.
board that I'm working on. Yeah, thank you, Jamboard. How can I get a copy of that? Would the link stay live? Because it's like it has enabled me to just unlock a bit of my brain that wasn't functioning properly. So I really like it, and I'd like to be able to keep access of the verbal diarrhea that I've done that actually seems to be making a little bit of sense on the page. So will this link remain live for us? I'm just checking.
Yeah, this will
Or
be
should I try and make a copy?
this will remain live for you to continue using.
Thank you very
And
much.
just the invitation, I guess, being if you want to further develop with it and just, you know, make sure that you have continuous access to it. Maybe you can even just transfer what you've written in there into this Google document that I'm sharing on the screen right now.
Yeah.
So that could be like the next step of continuous of continuing to work with it.
Like it. Yeah, that's really helpful. Cool. Thank you. Thanks, Tim. Thank you.
All right, so we have 5 minutes left. So
Yeah.
maybe just we can do a closing round and hear what's what felt most valuable for you about our session today.
Great. So let's see who would be willing to go first.
And also, if you
really
what was valuable for you,
Yeah.
also if you have any reflections or feedback,
Any comment that people want to have. Let's go Hannah and then Daniel and then go from there.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, it's cool. Really useful. And I feel like I'd love to use that with the few people that are kind of kicking around ideas with me. Thanks.
Thanks, Hannah. And Daniel?
Yeah, thanks, Tim. This was really useful. I was just wondering whether you had any experience of trying this within a sort of a co-design session. It seems very, particularly with the Jamboard panel, I could see it functioning in that context. Is that anything you've tried?
You're muted, but maybe it's okay just to do a go around.
Sorry. Yeah, maybe you can continue and I can respond to it if we still have time.
Let's go Sally, Rosie, Darren, Monica, and me.
Thank you, Tim. It's been very inspirational, and I'm heartened to know that in an indirect way it's come from the permaculture movement, and I shall be looking forward to working out how I can turn it into a permaculture design process. So yeah, if I do, I'll share it with you.
Thanks, Sally.
Beautiful, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tim. Yeah, I think like a lot of people, it does feel, I do feel like unlocking of my brain, and it's, I'm really looking forward to using it. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Rosie. Darren?
Yeah, I've enjoyed using it, but I've got stuck in the back of my mind now how to make it into, how to get an output from it, some kind of graphic that you can report back to funders to show you where your target is and where you actually achieve. So yeah, I might have to have a little bit of a play with that and see what we can do.
Great.
But yeah, fascinating. Thank you.
Please do share it. And Monica?
Yeah, just to reiterate what everyone said, it's been really useful to just think of it in a really like it's, I've had to think in like blocks and chunks, which was really helpful, that I'd never really considered before. So yeah, nice, really creative way to think. So yeah, thank you. Found it really useful, really useful. will enjoy
Right.
playing around with it.
Thanks,
I'd be curious if you wanted to say one more sentence about what it unlocked for you, because it seemed like you had a little aha moment or something.
I think, as I said, I came here with a bit of a transition, community growing head on. I'd come with my permaculture little muscle flexing. However, I can really see its application for the hub development with transition. Yeah, just that natural people growing, the legacy of the hub. So yeah, I didn't expect for transition to seep in such a way, but it has, and it was very beautiful and delightful.
Right.
Wonderful.
Thanks, Monica. For me, I mean, I would say, I mean, for a start, people in permaculture love a good tool. We like a tool, don't we? And this is like a really good one. And actually in permaculture, we're always talking about 3D, like farming in 3D. So instead of monocultures and just we're going 3D. So we're having, lots of trees and bushes and vines and, so it fits really, really well. And I think it designing in 3D like this, I think it gives you prompts a lot of really creative thinking about how you can make your project just that bit more effective. There's something about it which kind of really invites that kind of good project design. So I guess I'm most excited by how accessible you've made it, because I think that's really important. Because if we could find something which we could teach on all our permaculture courses and we could put into our project learning guides, and we could kind of popularize it, and if transition are doing that as well, and then permaculture is doing that, then we've got this like shared tool to think about our impact, and then that means that collectively we'll have more impact. So yeah, I think that the simplicity of the way you put it across is for me the thing that I've really got out of this evening. So thanks for that. And then yeah, let's go back to Daniel's question just before we leave. And have you done this in a co-design kind of context?
Yeah, so I guess what comes up for me thinking about co-design is designing a project plan or the strategy of transition network, right? So yeah, we've in the Transition Together project, we've really used this model in a very granular and detailed way. So I mean, at the beginning, as a team, we were reflecting on what are so in the 3D framework, there are these specific sub elements similar to the ones that I've shared previously in the second slide, and to really think through, like, for each of those parts, what would we like to see as a result in terms of the effect on transition groups or the movement, transition movement at large, and then to think of how do each of the work streams of the project contribute to that, and not all the work streams equally, some more so of course than others. So it became quite a complex endeavor to really apply it in like such a detailed way. So that's also part of the learning. This is still a sort of ongoing learning process of how to make this quite comprehensive and complex tool. At the same time, it has the simplicity to it, and how to really then like operationalize it in a way that it's easy to use and not overwhelming, while still kind of holding that complexity in view.
Great.
So yeah.
Okay, well look, I think I'm going to draw it to a close. We said we'd go for 90 minutes and we've all got to go to bed and tuck in nicely. So get your hot water bottles out, it's cold out there. So it's really, really lovely to have you all here today, and thanks Tim for a really fantastic presentation and for making it interactive. That's really appreciated too. So yeah, strength to all your projects. I hope you're doing well. Stay in touch, look after each other. See you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for hosting.
Thank you. Okay.
Lovely.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.